In this video, we'll write a function that finds the sum of elements in a vector recursively. So there's a function that receives a vector of integer elements, and the function computes the sum of the elements in the vector recursively and returns that sum. For that, I'm going to use a helper function. So here is the name of the helper function. A return type is an integer. Let's call it sum recursive helper. And then the parameters that it receives, it's a vector of integer type. Let's call it v, and then starting index start, and then ending index start, and then I have the last index last. We need to include vector, # include vector. We also need to use namespace, proper namespace, that is the std. So continuing with the code, here is the base case. If the start index is the same as the last index, then this vector has only one element, and the sum of the elements would be that single element, basically. Start. V of start will be returned. Else we will return. Now comes the basically recursive solution. How do you reduce the size of the problem, basically? Well, a strategy would be to grab the first element in the vector and add that first element to the sum of the rest of the elements. And that is basically means we take v of start and add to it, here is a recursive call, SumRec helper, and then we send the vector up, but we'll start from start +1 and go all the way to the last element. That's how we reduce the size of basically the problem. Now that I have the helper function, I go and write the actual recursive function. This is sum recursive. It only receives a vector, an integer vector. Let's call the parameter v, and all it does, it simply calls the return. It simply calls the helper function, sum rec helper. You will send v up. The starting index is 0 and the last index is v.size. We grab the size of the vector and subtract 1 from it, and that will be it. So these two functions together basically will do the job for us. Now I'll go to the main. Here I already had written a factorial function and tested it, and now we want to test the sum function. So start by creating a vector of integers in the main. Let's call this vector myv and set it equal to, let's say, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's say that's the vector, the elements of the vector, and then we'll have this cout the sum of the elements is. Now we'll make a call to sum, I believe that's the name of the function, sum recursive, and just send the vector to it, myv. Here's end line. So that's it. Let's run this. We'll run this and see what comes out of that one. That is the factorial example. 5 factorial equal to 120. That's from previous example. Now, the sum of the elements in the vector, 1 + 2 is 3, 3 and 3 is 6, and 4 is 10. That's 10, which is correct.